Welcome to Biz Jet TV. My name is Fabrizio Poli. I'm your aviation advisor, and today we're going to be talking about the 7 key performance factors that you need to look at before you buy a private jet. And I guess you've come to this video because that's what you're looking to do, either lease or buy a jet. And very often people get caught in the pricing. Oh, this is cheaper than the other one, or they get caught in the cabin. Oh, the layout, I like the layout. Oh, this has got a shower, I want to buy this one. Or this has got a large cabin, let's buy this. And all the operating costs, and people get caught in these elements. But you know, these 7 factors we're going to talk about today on this video are probably the most important things you need to be looking at when considering which private jet to buy. And I do recommend you have you get professional advice in looking at these 7 factors because it's really important that you get these 7 things right before you purchase your aircraft. So if you haven't subscribed to Biz Jet TV, I encourage you to subscribe to this channel all about private aviation and lots more about how to use these incredible flying machines to make you money as business tools. And comment below, and we love to hear your comments and suggestions and recommendations for other videos. And please give us a thumbs up, that helps to get the word out there of this channel, and share the video with your friends, family, business associates and competitors, whoever it may be. And let's get the word out there about Biz Jet TV. Something that is important, because the private jet is a business tool, a very valuable business tool, and if you use it right, you can really grow your business exponentially. So let's get straight in now to the 7 key factors. Off we go. So there are 7 factors that play into aircraft performance that we need to look at when deciding which aircraft we're going to buy. Now, they are 7, and the first one is runway, the second is terrain, the third is weather, fourth is the approach procedures, number 5, hangar availability, number 6, aircraft performance, and number 7, pilot training. So we're going to look at these one by one. The first one is the runway. Now, when we're looking at a runway and the types of runways we're going to be flying into, we need to see if the runways at that airport are paved or unpaved. There are obviously, if you are buying a smaller aircraft because you have to go into closer destinations, then looking at unpaved runways is a good one, because it just gives more availability of airports. Just to give you an idea, in the United States alone, there are about 5,000 paved runways, but if we open it up to unpaved runways as well, there's about 10,000 airstrips which you can fly into. So it just gives you more operational capability. But that will work with certain types of operation, and this is why I always say, for us to get specific, we need to do a one-to-one call, and you can ping me an email and we'll schedule you in for a call to get specific. But let's keep going now on the runway thing. So after we've seen paved and non-paved, if the runway is paved, we need to look at the PCN number. Okay, the pavement classification number, which basically tells us the weight limitation of that runway. Now, if the pavement limitation number, PCN number is very low, it means that a bigger aircraft cannot land on that runway. So that's really important to look at. The other factor we have to look at is the length of the runway, and of course the number of runways at the airfield. So the length of the runway, and then we have to see the elevation of the airport, which means how far up or what's the elevation above sea level. So that tells you it's 4,000 feet. That means the airfield is 4,000 feet above sea level. And that is important because that plays into the performance of the aircraft, because in the summer in particular, when it gets hot, if the airfield is at a high elevation, that will affect the performance of the aircraft, which means it will probably need more runway to land. So these are important factors to consider regarding the runway, and of course the number of runways as well. Because if there are more runways, what happens is if the wind suddenly changes and you've only got one runway and you end up getting a tailwind and the other runway you can't use for some reason, then you can't land at that airport. But if the airport has more than one runway, then the control tower will just change the runway in use and you'll be able to land with a favourable wind. So that's important to consider when you're looking at see if there's a number of runways, more than one runway. The second thing is to look at is terrain. So is it in a mountainous region? And sometimes the airport can be close to the mountains. Sometimes it may be in a valley, but there are mountains either side. Okay, but you may have enough space to come in, depending how the procedure is designed. So terrain is an important one to look at. The third one is the weather. What's the weather like all year round? What's it like in the summer? What's it like in the winter? Winter, of course, the problems you may have will be icing, snow, fog, all that kind of thing. Is that a problem in the winter months? In the summer, does it get really hot? Is this airfield at high elevation? How is that going to play into the performance of my aeroplane? The fourth one is the type of procedures to go in there, the approach procedures. So does it have an instrument landing system? Is it certified for to go in on a steep approach? And if so, is your aircraft approved for the steep approach? So the types of procedures for that airfield, are they precision approaches, non-precision approaches? Are there any RNAVs, which is basically a navigation approach which works with satellites, and all those things. So the types of procedures are important. And some airports don't have any procedures, okay? If it's one of these grass strips, very often there are no procedures, but you can design your own. And a lot of them now are being introduced, because once upon a time what you had to have like an instrument landing system actually fitted at the airfield, or a VOR in that, which meant putting equipment into the airfield, which obviously costs money. Now we've got this sophisticated GPS equipment and that which works with the satellites. Very often you don't need equipment on the ground. You can design this whole procedure using the satellites. And I remember when I used to operate in the Middle East, we used to land some of these airfields in the desert, and we had these special RNAV approaches, which was designed using the satellites and these waypoints. And we'd have certain altitude we had to be at certain waypoints, and we just punched that into the computer, and we landed into these desert airfields, nice long paved runways with these 737s, and it was good fun. And so there were procedures for that airfield that had been designed. The next one is hangar and hangar availability, and this is something that you don't want to underestimate. Even if there's good weather where you're going, let's say you're flying into an airfield which is close to the sea or the ocean, and you keep parking the airplane outside. That ocean salt coming in, and that air can get into the engines and can damage the engines. There's corrosion that can happen and whatnot. So the advice is always to try and put your airplane in a hangar. In particular, if you're staying for 3 or 4 days, try and park it in a hangar. If you're in places like this, if you're just outside in places like, Milan or Dallas or whatever, you can, if it's a dry climate, parking the aircraft outside for a few days isn't a problem. But usually it's always best to keep your airplane in a hangar. It also keeps it safe from any people that want to damage your airplane or whatever, to keep it parked in a hangar. So you want to find out hangar availability, in particular where you're going to be basing your aircraft. If your aircraft is going to be sitting on the ground for a number of days a month, different if you intend to fly 2 or 3 times a week and you're always flying, and maybe if you're flying long distance, then maybe it's not that important. But again, if you're spending $20 million on a jet, what's $60,000, $70,000 a year, maybe, whatever it's going to cost you to put your aircraft in the hangar, depending on the size and where you're based. So I'd look at that, because that can help, in particular in winter months and things like that. If the aircraft has been in a heated hangar and then you pull it out and you gas up quickly, ready to go, you may not have to de-ice. De-icing has a cost. So hangar is another one you need to look at. Number 6 is aircraft performance. And here what we do mainly, we're looking at the weight of the aircraft, we're looking at the wings, slats, flaps, what the landing speeds are at certain weights. Usually with a lower landing weight, you get a lower landing speed. But sometimes some of these aircraft have low landing speeds. For example, if you compare like a Lear 35 to a Falcon 900, even though the Falcon 900 is a larger aeroplane, it actually has a lower landing speed than most Lear jets. And so what does this tell you? It tells you it needs less runway. So here you've got an airplane that's got more range, okay, but because of the wing design, okay, and it's also heavier, got more range, carries more people, that can land on a shorter runway than a smaller aircraft. So the aircraft performance is important. The other thing you need to look at is, does the aircraft have thrust reversers? What are the brakes like? And look into that. And one thing you would do, especially if you are landing in shorter runways, is to look at the history of accidents of the aircraft and see, why these accidents happen. There's some aircraft, for example, that keep having brake failures, and you look at the accidents, you say, oh, there's been 15 accidents and 11 of them have been brake failure. So obviously this airplane's brakes are a bit weak. I'm going to be going into short fields, so maybe it's not the one I need to buy. So that's something you need to look at when you're looking at aircraft performance. Of course, cabin size, cabin size is something, some people like the larger cabin, some people want the smaller cabin. But, if you are going in and out the shorter airfields, you really need to be looking at performance more than cabin size. Because, that's critical. The reason why people buy private jets is because they need the speed, they need the flexibility of being going in and out to these smaller airfields or alternative airfields to the main big airfields at the main cities. And there's lots of these secondary airports out there, and that's one of the main reasons why people choose to fly by private jet. And then number 7 is pilot training. Now, if you are going into these airfields like Aspen, for example, and you say, okay, I'm going to be going into Aspen, 12, 15 times a year, but even if you're going in 2-3 times a year, I would suggest, you get your pilots trained up to fly into these places like Sion in Switzerland, Innsbruck in Austria, Aspen, Colorado. There are these types of airfields which are in mountainous regions, and some of them only have one runway. So they have approach procedures in there, but they are quite particular. Salzburg is another one I trained to fly into and flew in there in the winter, which can be a bit tricky. So it's important that your pilots get special training for that particular airfield in your particular aircraft, and that they are proficient at this type of training. Kathmandu is another one which I did training for to fly into. That's a tricky one in the Himalayas. So you really want to go through, your pilots go through that training and recurrent training every year, just to make sure that they're current, they know how to fly into these airfields, because it can be tricky. And flying in when the weather's nice, it's easy, but what most of the training is about is, let's say you're coming in and you have to suddenly do a go around because the weather's really bad, you get an engine failure on your go around. Now how are you going to handle it? And this is the type of pressure that the pilots will be under during the training, and they'll go through all these different scenarios during the training, and this will help if suddenly they do get into a situation like that with you and your family on board. They know exactly what to do, and that's what the simulator is all about. So it's important for your pilot training to be done on a regular basis, and designed particularly for these airfields. And if you are going into multiple airfields like this, make sure that your pilots get more training. As I always say, that these private jet pilots, as a private jet pilot, you don't fly as much as the airline pilots, so you need more training. And if you're going into these tricky airfields, you need specific training on these airfields, as well as the usual systems training on the aircraft and emergency training, etc., etc. But also creating scenarios around these airfields is really, really important. So these are the 7 factors that you need to look into when you're buying a private jet and choosing the right private jet for you. You need to look at all these factors. A lot of people get caught in the whole cost of operating the aircraft, but I think these factors are far more important, because at the end of the day, it's about accomplishing the mission. And so flying in and out these places, to be able to land safely, go in, do your business deal, make your $100 million on the deal, which pays for your aircraft, having that flexibility to be able to do that and travel with your team safely, safe away from viruses and things like that, and in and out quick. You control the schedule of the aircraft and all these great things which are the benefits of flying by private jet. So I'd like to hear your comments below if you enjoyed this video, and as I said before, if you want to get specific, we can talk one-to-one and hear more about your business and about your needs, and see which aircraft is best for your type of operation. And if you haven't checked these other videos here on aircraft types, you may want to check this thread of videos, which I'm sure you'll find interesting. And that's all from Fabrizio Poli on Biz Jet TV, and I'll see you on the next one.